Oh boy, here we go. I've made myself very clear that I'm greatly disappointed with this year's film releases, so it may come as a surprise that I actually liked both Karate Kid Legends and Ballerina. I don't think that they're great by any means, and they obviously aren't trying to blow anyone away, but I actually found the simplicity of both of these movies to be refreshing. Both Karate Kid and Ballerina failed at the box office, and I see that as a real shame that movies like Lilo and Stitch and Minecraft are both sitting at the top of this year's charts, and movies that are actually pretty good have gotten shafted. Like I said, I think both of these movies are just okay, but I also think that they deserved better than this. Let's get into the fun times that are Karate Kid Legends and Ballerina. Starting with Karate Kid, I was extremely confused by this movie's existence. I hopped off of Cobra Kai before it wrapped up, but from what I've heard, people liked how that show ended. So to see a new Karate Kid movie announced so soon after the ending of a long-running show like Cobra Kai, and to have another project not even a year later, seemed weird to me. From the trailers, I thought that Legends looked like it would be a generic story, but not a bad one. Yeah, that's what it is. I knew exactly where the story was going to go, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. A simple story told well can still be entertaining, and luckily this is. I was surprised by how much I liked the new characters. The main kid, Lee Fong, is likable enough, and I like the chemistry he had with Mia, and his relationship with her father was nice too. The fight scenes are a mixed bag. I'm glad they didn't shoot them like Cobra Kai's fights again. Take this with a grain of salt, but as someone who's only seen 4 seasons of Cobra Kai, I liked the fight scenes in that series, but I wanted to see a new style of filmmaking for this new Karate Kid. The fights in this movie have these video gamey effects played over them, and while I can appreciate it from an editing perspective, the effects do border on being a little cheesy. I should probably mention the returning characters. Ralph Macchio returns as Daniel LaRusso because, what else is Ralph Macchio doing? As well as Jackie Chan as Mr. Han from the 2010 remake of Karate Kid. That inclusion in particular made me raise an eyebrow when I saw it in the trailer. Modern Karate Kid is no stranger to referencing its past films, but I never thought they would even mention the 2010 remake. This isn't a criticism of that decision in any way, I just thought it was an interesting detail to include. Spoilers for Ballerina and John Wick 4. Okay, on to Ballerina. In this review, you'll see me comparing this film to Furiosa: Mad Max Saga. Both films are spin-offs with a female lead, both are semi-prequels, and both have a similar tagline, except unlike Furiosa, Ballerina's tagline actually means something, as John Wick is a major character with significant plot relevance. That, and Ballerina uses the world of John Wick far more effectively than Furiosa utilized Mad Max's setting. I had way more fun with this movie than I thought I would. I'm not a big fan of John Wick 3 and 4. I think they're both still fine movies, but I prefer the first two way more. The moment 3 and 4 lost me was the introduction of body armor. It is a natural extension of John Wick's fight scenes, but the inclusion of body armor also made the fights last for far longer than they should. It would take like 7 shots for John to take down a single guy. Ballerina being placed earlier in the timeline because, kinda has to be, lacks the body armor, which makes each of the wonderfully creative fight scenes flow so much better and gives them a more similar feel to the first 2 movies. At first, I walked away from the movie thinking that Ana de Armas' character, the titular Ballerina, wasn't really that much of a character. But then I thought about it a little bit more and remembered that John Wick isn't much of a character. All of the characters in John Wick aren't bad, but they are very simple, with basic motivations. But that's kind of the point of the series. The appeal of John Wick isn't the characters or story, that's just there to get you to the real selling points. The fight choreography and the world building, which this movie delivers on. In summary, I thoroughly enjoyed both Karate Kid Legends and Ballerina, which makes their underwhelming performance at the box office sting a little. I'd recommend you give these movies a watch if you're a fan of either of these franchises. They aren't going to revolutionize anything, but their simple charm was something I found I was sorely missing this year.
Begin audio prompt in 3, 2, 1.
Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't think I need to explain what that is. I have a lot of respect for Scott Cawthon. Not that I particularly love everything he does, but both him and Toby Fox are like the exemplars for indie game developers, starting from basically nothing and growing a massive fan base. Of course, Toby Fox is better at telling a story, but FNAF has grown from being a small indie game made up of PNGs to one of the biggest media franchises ever. The developers of the more recent games, Steel Wool Studios, have had a complicated history with the series. From the simple but effective minigame collections of the Help Wanted games to literally making the worst game in the entire franchise. I'm not kidding when I say that Security Breach is one of the most poorly designed games I've ever played. The free DLC, Ruin, while being more structurally sound, was still lacking in terms of gameplay, so you can see why I wasn't exactly excited to play Secret of the Mimic. So, after playing it, it's fine. It's definitely the best non-VR game they've made, which as I'll discuss later is pretty ironic, but it still has issues that hold it back. So let's get right into Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic. You play as a technician who's tasked with retrieving vital information for Fazbear Entertainment from Murray's Costume Manor. This manor was owned by a man named Edwin. He made the Mimic, an animatronic endoskeleton designed to work with any mascot costume. Now you have to get the information and get out alive while the Mimic hunts you throughout the mansion. I'll start with what I like about the game. The story is actually pretty good. Considering Security Breach's horrible excuse for a story, I wasn't really expecting much here, but I ended up not only enjoying it, but also I could understand it without having to read one of the FNAF novels or being a theorist. I get that part of FNAF's appeal is its complicated story, but I've always been more drawn towards the games with the more cut and dry storytelling. That being said, I did accidentally get the secret ending, so maybe the main ending is more vague than what I experienced. One of the few things Security Breach got right was its impressive art and animations, and that quality is carried over to this game, and it actually looks better here. While Security Breach's visuals were appealing to look at, they weren't even remotely trying to be scary. Now, the designs for this game aren't particularly scary looking either, but at least they're trying this time. Okay, on to what I don't like. Remember how I said it's ironic that this is their best non-VR game? Well, it's obvious that this game was supposed to be played in VR. To interact with most things in this game, you have to first hold down the left click and then move the mouse to move your hand. For example, to flip a lever facing up, you need to approach the lever, hold down left click to grab the lever, then move the mouse down to activate the lever. This control scheme is pretty annoying to work with. It makes tasks like opening doors, which used to be done by just pressing a single button, way more complicated than it needs to be, and it's an unfortunate leftover of the game's VR bones. Steel Wool also can't seem to make the AI in their games work. This game uses the usual Outlast/Alien Isolation style of gameplay, distracting enemies, hiding in lockers, that type of stuff. Sometimes the AI for the animatronics would open the locker I was hiding in if they saw me, but most of the time I could hide right in front of them and they would forget I even existed. An issue I've seen some discuss online is how this game doesn't really feel like a FNAF game. It seems like as FNAF is evolving, it's also becoming less original. Five Nights at Freddy's wasn't the first mascot horror game, but the originals were the ones that inspired other developers to make their own similar games. Now, FNAF seems to have gone from inspiring other developers to take after it to trying to copy what everyone else is doing. Using cliche chase sequences and basic puzzles that other popular, more recent games in the genre have, rather than having its own identity. Which is weird because while this game doesn't feel like FNAF, another recent game in the series does. Five Nights at Freddy's Into the Pit. Now, Into the Pit shares a lot in common with Secret of the Mimic, having chase sequences and simple puzzles, but unlike Secret of the Mimic, I feel it has a style that more closely fits with Five Nights at Freddy's. From the artwork to the animations to the atmosphere, everything just seemed to fit more in the FNAF universe. In summary, Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic is not a bad game, but it has too many issues for me to call it a good one either. I've seen some online claim that Secret of the Mimic is one of, if not the best FNAF game. Like the beginning of the video said, if you think that, then that's completely fine. For me, FNAF 1 is still the best game in the series, followed by Pizzeria Simulator. I'm glad to see Steel Wool improving themselves with every release, but I still feel like they have a long way to go.
That's the last rubber band I had.
The 28 series of movies. Ew, that doesn't sound right. But then again, calling it the 28 Days franchise doesn't sound right either, because only one of the films is called that. Okay, screw it. This franchise has always been known for redefining what it means to be a zombie movie. I like both 28 Days Later and 28 Months Later. I'm not a massive fan of them, but I think that they're pretty cool takes on the zombie genre, with interesting filmmaking techniques and messages. So, when 28 Years Later got announced, I sort of responded with, oh, that's cool, I guess. That is until I saw the trailer. 28 Years Later genuinely has one of the best trailers I've ever seen for a movie, which is so rare to see nowadays where even good movies get bad trailers. I didn't even want to watch any of the other marketing for the film because the first trailer already completely sold me. I'll say this before we get into the video. That trailer may have overhyped me a bit. I don't think the movie lived up to the expectations that trailer set, but I still think this is a really good movie. Still, it does have some issues, but not enough to drag it down for me. So let's get into the twisted world of 28 Years Later. Spoilers ahead. The film takes place 28 years after the outbreak began. Shocking, I know. The setting of the movie is a small island which is disconnected from the mainland until a specific time of day when the people of the island go out to scavenge for resources. After a father, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, takes his son Eric out to hunt, they return to the boy's sick mother. Eric decides to go on a mission to save the mother by finding the only remaining doctor in the area, who's believed to have gone insane. I'll start with the obvious, the film's plot is kind of all over the place. That's definitely a style the film is going for, and to the film's credit, I really didn't know where the plot was going to go next, but at times it does feel like the story was just there to get the characters moving from one set piece to another. So I guess it's a good thing that the set pieces are thoroughly entertaining. I actually really liked most of the characters, with amazing performances from people like Ray Fiennes, Jodie Comer, and Aaron Taylor Johnson. But the most important performance is the main kid. His acting is the make or break for a story like this, and fortunately, Alfie Williams does a fantastic job selling each emotional moment. The filmmaking techniques on display in this movie are absolutely amazing, with the opening action sequence especially having some crazy shots that are even crazier when you realize they were done by basically strapping a bunch of iPhones together. While I did like most of the characters, I was a little disappointed that the film pretty much forgets about the father halfway in, with him only making a minor appearance at the end. I thought for sure they were going to bring him back later in the story, but he just gets brushed to the side. The visuals of this movie are astounding, with impressive practical effects, costume design, and sets that make this world truly feel isolated and alone. Also, the ending is super weird. Apparently it's a reference to something exclusive to British culture, but I don't know anything about that. Maybe I'll understand it by the time the next movie comes out in like a decade from now. In summary, 28 Years Later is by no means a masterpiece. In fact, the more you poke at it, the more cracks start to form, but it's heavily carried by its amazing atmosphere, performances, emotional moments, and cinematography. When I review any piece of media, what I'm looking for above all else is a clear creative vision. If a movie feels like it's made by a corporation just to be as marketable as possible, I'll probably enjoy it less. It's why I'm glad movies like Sinners and 28 Years Later exist, because it's these movies where you are fully enveloped in a person's mind, attempting to understand why they made the decisions they did. And that's why I do this in the first place. I gotta be honest with you. I don't know anything about Formula 1, or any type of racing for that matter. But racing films are quickly becoming my personal favorite genre of sports film, so when I heard that the director behind Top Gun Maverick was doing this movie, it instantly became one of my most anticipated releases of this year. I'm happy to say that F1 is an amazing movie, especially in IMAX, which is how I saw it, with great sound design and cinematography, as well as a story that, while simple, was still extremely entertaining. Just like Top Gun Maverick, F1 is a masterpiece of filmmaking. Except for one thing, but we'll get there when we get there. So allow me to explain why you should watch F1. The movie, not the... The story follows Sonny Hayes, played by Brad Pitt, who used to be a famous Formula 1 driver until an accident causes him to stop racing F1. Now, 30 years later, Sonny returns to help out a friend of his in his struggling Formula 1 team, and now has to race alongside a rookie hotshot named Joshua Pierce, played by Damson Idris. So yeah, it's a pretty basic outline for a sports movie, but like I've said before, just because a movie has a simple story doesn't mean it's bad as long as that story is well done. But the real draw of this movie isn't the characters or story, it's the mind-blowing race sequences. This director is insanely talented at placing you into these super speed death machines, whether it be a fighter jet or a Formula 1 race car. The sound design, the camera angles, and the visuals simulate the feeling of being on the racetrack perfectly. Or at least I think it is. I don't know, I'm not an F1 racer. Unfortunately, I did say there was one issue that I have with this movie. Sunny has a romantic interest in this movie, played by Carrie Condon, which on the surface wouldn't be a problem. In fact, it seems like a good idea. Giving Sunny a love interest would add an extra layer of depth to the races considering how dangerous they are. It should do that, but Sunny and Kate, that's the love interest by the way, don't have much chemistry together, and the scenes with them just add unnecessary padding. I could see the argument that these scenes are meant to serve as pace breakers to give the audience a rest, if the scenes with Sunny and Joshua didn't already do that. I'm not saying Kate as a character is pointless entirely, but I think it would have been better if her and Sunny grew closer in the story as friends. That way you could still have the connection between the two characters while also removing some of the bloat the film has and giving it a more reasonable runtime. In summary, F1 is a really good movie. I don't think I like it as much as Top Gun Maverick, but honestly, that's a pretty high bar to clear. While I do have that one issue with it, this is definitely one of the best films of this year, and maybe this is a sign that we're coming out of the darkness the beginning of the year had. I mean, I put out 2 positive videos back to back for 3 movies total, so that's gotta be a good thing, right? Or maybe I just got lucky. I guess we'll see. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should watch F1.
Oh, these are pretty cool bananas.
Before you comment anything, yes, I know that some may not have a Nintendo Switch 2 to play Donkey Kong Bonanza on, whether that be due to financial reasons, shortages, or personal reasons. When I label a video you should play or you should watch, it's meant to serve as a badge of honor that I think a piece of media is of extremely high quality all around, and Donkey Kong Bonanza is well deserving of that label. This was the game that most excited me from the Switch 2 Direct. A 3D Donkey Kong game from the team that did Mario Odyssey with fully destructible environments sounded like it was practically made for me. Donkey Kong Bonanza features this team's creativity and amazing game design that was present in Mario Odyssey and times it by 10. With great gameplay, art direction, and animation, Bonanza has quickly risen to becoming one of my favorite games of this year. So let's get right into why you should play Donkey Kong Bonanza. The story follows Donkey Kong and Pauline, who need to journey to the core of their planet in order to grant both of their wishes by traveling through several collectathon platforming locales. The big gimmick with this game is the fact that every single environment is 100% destructible, which I can only imagine will lead to some crazy speedrun strategies. On top of your usual platforming gameplay, you'll also have special abilities called Bonanzas, which grant Donkey Kong special abilities like being able to destroy the environment more effectively or the ability to run faster. Throughout the game, you'll be collecting bananas, which unlike Mario Odyssey's main collectibles, aren't required to continue the game and instead allow you to level up skills once you collect enough. Is it weird that I found the story to actually be pretty engaging? I mean, it's obviously not Shakespeare or anything, but I found DK and Pauline's Diet Last of Us relationship to be quite heartwarming. And I won't spoil anything here, but man, that ending. It might even be better than Mario Odyssey's. This game's visuals are spectacular to look at, with bright and vibrant environments and expressive character animations that are full of charm. The moment-to-moment gameplay of DK Bonanza is incredibly satisfying. The tight controls, destructible terrain, and level design all come together to make a game that's hard to put down once you pick it up. Okay, I know I've been nothing but positive so far, but are there any issues I had while playing? Well, yeah, but it's not a big one. The frame rate dips are extremely frequent, especially when doing things like destroying a mass of the level or looking at the map of the area I was in. It's a reminder that even with the upgraded power of the Switch 2, Nintendo is still working on old hardware. That being said, the frame rate dips, while noticeable at first, became less noticeable the more I played, and it didn't really affect my enjoyment of the game as a whole, though I could see how others may find it more problematic. In summary, Donkey Kong Bonanza is the Switch 2's first real killer app, and honestly probably should have been the launch title, either instead of or alongside Mario Kart. I said this before in my Mario Kart World video, but now that I've actually played Bonanza, it's even weirder how this is the game that has the $70 price tag, while Mario Kart got $80. Personally, I got and probably will continue to get more enjoyment and substance out of DK Bonanza. But you know Nintendo, they always do the opposite of what people expect them to do, which is sometimes for the best and other times for the worst. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should play Donkey Kong Bonanza. I've been vocal in previous videos about my opinions on how this year's two biggest superhero movies looked. Long story short, I really didn't feel anything towards both Superman and Fantastic Four's trailers. They both didn't look bad, but I wasn't excited about either of them. I haven't seen Fantastic Four yet, so stay tuned for what I think about that, but I have seen Superman. On so many levels, I should not like this movie. There are so many weird decisions made, like some questionable storytelling choices or hit and miss visuals. By all means, this video's thumbnail should be at least a yellow, maybe even borderline red. So why do I kinda love this movie? Well, allow me to explain as we dive into this new take on Superman. Let's start by talking about the previous Superman. I really like Henry Cavill as Superman. I think he's a great actor and fits perfectly in that role. I hate Zack Snyder's version of Superman. Turning the most optimistic and hope-filled hero from DC and turning him dark and brooding didn't feel like Superman. It felt like Batman. I don't hate Snyder. In fact, I actually think his style of filmmaking can be incredibly interesting, but that style just doesn't work for a character like Superman. It's so nice to see a brighter take on this character, and James Gunn seems to have merged a little of the original Christopher Reeve Superman with his own style to create a version of the character that feels familiar while also being something brand new. David Cornsweet gives a great performance, in fact all of the actors do. Rachel Brosnahan, Nicholas Colt, Nathan Fillion, etc. The entire cast is really giving their all in this movie, and it shows. If you really dissect this movie, you can definitely find the issues it has, and I definitely have some issues. Issue 1. The CGI looks awful. While the makeup and costume design is actually really spot on, the same can't be said for the CGI. I think my biggest issue with the movie comes from Krypto. I get making Krypto a CGI model for when stuff just physically can't be done by a real dog, but Krypto is CGI for the entire movie. This is a big deal because the audience has to be convinced that Krypto is actually there so that any emotional or character-driven moments he may have with Superman work. And in order for it to work, the CGI either needed to be really good for the entire film, or they should have just used a real dog whenever they could to save the heavy lifting of CGI for only when absolutely necessary. And it's not just the dog. There are multiple moments of poor CGI in this film that really just take you out of the movie. Issue number 2. The comedy. This is definitely the most subjective one. James Gunn is famous for being able to blend hilarious comedy with gripping emotional moments, but recently I feel he's been lacking when it comes to his comedy. I still got a few chuckles from Superman, but for the most part I was more interested in the characters and story and felt like the comedy only distracted from the real strong suit of the film. Issue 3. Where's Clark Kent? There are rare moments in this movie where Superman is Clark Kent, but I feel like it should have been expanded more. Come to think of it, I also think that about the Batman and Bruce Wayne. In the original Superman, showing us the life of Clark Kent was there to show us the grounded humanity of Superman, and allowed for further expansion of the character in a much more normal setting. There's a spoiler coming up if you care. There's a big chunk of this movie where Superman is trapped in a prison created in a pocket dimension by Lex Luthor, and this section of the movie serves a very similar purpose. While I think it works here too, I also think there's a bit of an audience disconnect with having this side of the character be exposed in such an otherworldly location. I know there's an argument that some may make that secret identities like Clark Kent and Bruce Wayne are unimportant and the audience just wants to see superheroes do superhero stuff, but personally I think these sides to the heroes make up half of why audiences relate and connect with the characters. So these are some pretty major issues I have with the movie. Poor visual effects, distracting comedic elements, and lacking a major aspect of the character should bring this film down for me, right? Well, surprisingly, no. When I go into something with the intent to review it, I have a certain process I use. While watching a movie, I take mental notes of how it made me feel at certain parts throughout, and then when the movie is over, I dissect why I felt those emotions. So while I did notice some issues while watching that by all means should have left me with a negative experience, I left the theater with a sense of joy that I wasn't at all expecting to feel. There's a certain charm this movie has that allows me to look past a lot of the issues I have with it, which is an impressive feat for any piece of media. In summary, Superman is far from perfect, but its chaotic and fun energy, stellar performances, and entertaining story managed to win me over in the end in a way that only a few movies are able to do. It might be a mess at times, but it's a mess I'd happily watch again.
Brayden, go back in your bed.
Ever get that feeling of deja vu, but it's a weird type of deja vu where the moment you're reliving is actually better than before? No? Just me? Okay, whatever. Five Nights at Freddy's. I talked about another game on this channel, FNAF Secret of the Mimic, not too long ago. Long story short, I thought that game was okay, but was held back by certain design elements, mainly being the game's obvious VR controls that were hastily reworked to work in flat screen. Now, there I was, playing a little game I had bought a while back called The Midnight Walk, mainly because there wasn't anything for me to play before Mafia the Old Country came out. Well, except Death Stranding 2, but I didn't play the first game. And as I played The Midnight Walk, I began to experience the strange sense of deja vu I described at the start of the video. Playing this game was like I was playing Secret of the Mimic again, except a lot of the major issues I had with that game had been fixed. The Midnight Walk isn't a perfect game, but I still had a fun time with it, and found it to be a charming little horror experience. So let's get right into The Midnight Walk. The gameplay revolves around solving simple puzzles with your little companion named Pop Boy, all while avoiding terrifying monsters. That's the first thing this game has over Secret of the Mimic. The enemies actually look scary. The second positive is, while this game was designed with VR in mind, it doesn't feel unnatural to play it in flat screen. This game, which is an original IP from a much smaller developer, launched with both modes. Meanwhile, a Five Nights at Freddy's game, one of the biggest modern horror franchises, can barely manage a flat screen mode at launch with a VR mode promised as a free update later on. Okay, this whole video isn't just going to be me comparing this game to FNAF, so now let's talk about some pros and cons the game has. The Midnight Walk goes for a Tim Burton style of stop motion for its art style. The character design and atmosphere are by far this game's best quality, offering a peek into an interesting and dynamic world. This game's runtime is about 4 hours, which is a little on the short side, especially considering the game costs $40. Now, runtime and price points shouldn't necessarily be connected when talking about a game's worth, but it is a bit pricey, and I would consider getting this game on a sale if you're interested. The puzzles and stealth are pretty basic, but they get the job done perfectly fine and never felt boring or annoying to deal with. It never felt like the AI was stupid, but it didn't feel particularly smart either, and the puzzles more serve the purpose of extra storytelling rather than being obstacles. There is another issue I have with the game, but it didn't get in the way of my enjoyment too much. Your companion throughout the game, named Pop Boy, is used to solve the various puzzles. You can direct him by pointing at where he needs to go, but unfortunately there were times during my play sessions where he just wouldn't listen to me. Usually he would eventually correct himself, but there were also times when Pop Boy needed to do something on his own to continue the story and just wouldn't do it, causing me to have to reload my save to fix him. Luckily though, this issue isn't prevalent enough to be really that big of a deal, and it wasn't game breaking or anything, it was just a little annoying. In summary, The Midnight Walk is a fun little horror game with a lot of heart and charm. Like I said before, I don't know if I'd consider it worth the $40 price tag, but I definitely consider picking it up on a sale. It was nice to do an indie game again for a review. I've sort of been backed up with big franchises as of late. This isn't an amazing game by any means, but it was a good change of pace for me.
Look what the marketing guys gave me. Look, check it out. Listen. You love this.
It's clobbering time!
It's catchy, right? Isn't that great?
Just like Superman, I went into this movie with absolutely no expectations. The trailers didn't make it look bad, but I wasn't exactly excited, yada yada yada. I've already said this many times before this year. And just like Superman, I walked away from the Fantastic Four First Steps thoroughly entertained. It definitely feels like Marvel and Disney have been going through a lot of changes behind the scenes when it comes to the future of the MCU, but we haven't really been able to see any of those plans come to light until now. But now, Marvel seems to be focusing more on the future of this franchise, and brushing everything that was too far along in development to be cancelled under the rug. Specifically streaming projects like Agatha All Along, Ironheart, and even more popular shows like Loki Season 2, which had much less marketing compared to the first season. Now, I can't speak on the quality of any of these shows because I didn't watch them, but if they're anything like Marvel's theatrical offerings, then they probably range from just good enough to downright awful. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should... Oh wait, wrong script. Basically, what I'm saying is, Marvel is treating this film as a sort of rebirth project, and while the future of the MCU may still be a little shaky, both this and Thunderbolts are hopefully the foundation needed for a return to form for Marvel. So let's get right into the Fantastic Four First Steps. The story follows the Fantastic Four in an alternate version of the 1960s, who now have to face off against an intergalactic threat named Galactus who eats planets. Also, Sue Storm and Reed Richards are having a baby, which is why the movie is called First Steps. I'll start by saying that the performances were way better than I was expecting. You know how MCU acting is nowadays. Specifically Pedro Pascal. He's a fine actor, I don't really have anything against the man, but he has fallen into the habit recently of playing himself in a bunch of stuff. Fortunately, he remembered what acting is for this film, and especially near the climax of this movie, offers some emotional and intelligent performances. All the other actors did a great job as well, but by far my favorite performance has to be Ralph Ineson as Galactus, who brings a certain presence with his voice and greatly complemented the character. And that is the most important aspect that any Fantastic Four adaptation needs to get right. The Fantastic Four's individual and distinct characteristics are why so many comic book readers fell in love with them in the first place, and I'm glad to say that this is the best version of the team's main couple put to screen. Previous versions of Mr. Fantastic just didn't seem to nail the whole smartest man alive thing. Either they would just write him as a generic nerdy geek, or in the case of Multiverse of Madness, make him seem like the dumbest man alive, so it was nice to see a version of the character that could feasibly be given his proper title. Sue Storm, while not being that poorly written in previous movies, wasn't particularly given much to do. She would usually be given the smallest role, which definitely isn't the case here, as she might have the most important role to fill in this movie. But just because she has the most important role doesn't mean she hogs all the spotlight, as each member of the team is given a time to shine and show off what makes them special. Oh yeah, I guess I should talk about Johnny and Ben. They're fine. They're okay characters, but I will say I prefer the 2005 versions more. Their dynamic was just so well executed in that film and was greatly helped by the joyous acting of Chris Evans and Michael Chiklis. Well, I talked about what I liked, so now let's talk about the negatives the movie has. The CGI is a little iffy. Luckily, they used their resources where it really mattered, like Galactus and the Thing, and I overall enjoyed the alternate 60s look everything had, but there were certain moments where it could have used a little more work. Specifically the Silver Surfer CGI, which, especially around the face, looked super wonky. It's not nearly as bad as other Marvel film CGI, and it didn't affect my enjoyment of the movie overall, but it really says something when Disney, which is pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into these things, can't manage to do better than early aughts computer graphics. But hey, maybe that has something to do with them overworking and underpaying their CGI artists. In summary, The Fantastic Four First Steps is thankfully a movie I can say I had a good time watching. I think this year is really proving that superhero fatigue isn't really a thing. People aren't fed up with superhero media in general, they're just sick of bad superhero media. The truth is, superheroes are fun to watch and fun to write. And I'm glad that we finally realized that these type of movies and shows should be allowed to breathe and focus on just being entertaining.
My precious Michael. I slammed my balls on a closing door.
It's been a bit since I've played a good narrative-driven third-person shooter. Ever since the Uncharted series died and Sony decided to focus more on The Last of Us, I've had a small hole in my heart. The modern God of War games have sort of been my fallback for a while, but even though I love those games, it just couldn't fully replicate the feeling Uncharted gave me. So imagine my surprise when I heard of a new game that was releasing this year with people heavily comparing it to Uncharted. Mafia: The Old Country is an interesting game to me. First thing that caught my eye was obviously the Uncharted comparisons, but also the $50 price tag. In an age where AAA games usually cost $70 or even $80, this game, which is a new entry in a long-running franchise from a big publisher like 2K, was marking it at $10 less than the standard from just a few years ago. This is what really drew me to this game. So let's get right into Mafia: The Old Country. I haven't played any of the other Mafia games before this. They've been stuck in my Steam backlog for a bit now. From what I've heard, the old games were similar to GTA. This game is more linearly structured, which is probably due to a smaller team and budget. I'm completely fine with that. In fact, I think that recently AAA games have been too bloated and a smaller scale can greatly help the overall development. I'll start with what I like about the game. The visuals are really good. Not just the graphical fidelity, but also the art direction in general, which really puts you into the time period. The general gameplay of third-person shooting is also satisfying, having a bob and weave style as opposed to the usual cover-to-cover. Although that might just be my own playstyle, but hey, it worked. The third-person shooting isn't the only gameplay loop though, and this is where my issues with the game start appearing. The other gameplay elements that are actually gameplay are completely fine, stealth sections, horse racing, etc. But for some reason, the developers decide to copy the horse riding sections of Red Dead 2, where you're forced to walk slowly and talk, aka the one part of that game everyone agrees should have been cut down. You can skip some of these sections, which brings me to what I like to call the Spider-Man problem. If you have a section of your game that you know is not fun and has a dedicated button to skip it, then either make that section better or just cut it. It's even weirder because these sections make it feel like the game still thinks it's open world when it's not. The story and characters are serviceable. They aren't bad, but they aren't all that particularly memorable either, besides the Don, but I only remember him because every time he showed up, I kept thinking that he looked like Oscar Isaac. Like, I'm not crazy, right? I say to myself in my recording room, to no one. In summary, I greatly enjoyed my time with Mafia: The Old Country. There are a few things here and there that could have been tweaked, but I felt a strange comfort during my playtime. Here's the thing about narrative-driven games like this. There's nothing wrong with them, but for the longest time, people, especially publications and the Game Awards, viewed these kinds of games as the future of video games as a medium, which led to game studios pushing forward with ballooning budgets and crunch time, whereas indie devs were continuing to focus on just making a good game first and foremost. Which I think is why I'm being so generous to Mafia: The Old Country, for taking a step back and making a smaller game with a clear focus.
You're right on time, Lamekins. Make yourself a drink, baby.
No, thanks, Dutch.
Who are you and how did you get in here?
I'm the locksmith. And I'm the locksmith.
Comedies don't really exist anymore. They used to be really big for the same reason horror is big, small budgets and visceral reactions. Both horror films and comedies are usually cheap to produce and are designed to get a reaction out of the audience. Due to various reasons though, comedies became less popular and faded into obscurity, or were just reserved for animated movies and streaming services. The original Naked Gun is my favorite comedy movie ever. It took what made other spoofs at the time like Airplane great and refined it to a T. At first, I was extremely skeptical about the revival of The Naked Gun, but after seeing the trailers, it seemed like this would actually be a funny movie. After sitting down and watching it myself, I can happily say that The Naked Gun successfully recaptures the feeling of the original film while also being its own thing and not over-relying on callbacks. So let's get into the hilarious ride that is The Naked Gun. Obviously, comedy is subjective. What I might think is funny, you might not, and vice versa. But if my theater is anything to go by, then I'm not the only one that thought this movie was funny. My theater wasn't roaring with laughter or anything, but most jokes would get a sizable reaction. The jokes in this film are mostly original, and even the jokes that do call back or replicate something from the original movie offer some new twist to them that make them funny for a completely different reason. The movie never overindulges on referential humor and keeps its pacing light, constantly moving from one joke to the next. Liam Neeson is perfectly cast as a replacement for Leslie Nielsen, considering he's also mainly known for his serious roles and can provide that same deadpan sense of humor. I'm also glad that while a lot of funny jokes were in the trailer, there were enough that weren't, and it didn't make it feel like the trailer gave away all the best jokes, which is an issue comedies are known to have. In summary, The Naked Gun is a fun peek back into the files of Police Squad that offers new hilarious comedic moments while also maintaining the spirit of what came before. I'm glad that Hollywood has decided to give comedies a chance again. I could talk about the structure of a movie like this and why it worked so well for me, but at the end of the day, the most important aspect of this movie to me is that I got to sit in a theater and laugh with people for a couple of hours.
Mario Kart Super Circuit on Game Boy Advance.
So this game sort of just happened, huh? Dragon Drive, yes, I'm saying it right, look it up, was one of the most bizarre announcements from the Switch 2 reveal. A video game adaptation of wheelchair basketball utilizing the Switch 2 mouse controls really interested me, and I was curious as to how this game would be when it finally came out. Drag and Drive is, in short, just a cobbled together tech demo with not much substance, but I would be lying if I said I didn't find it a little entertaining. So let's get into Drag and Drive. Like I said before, this game is a video game version of wheelchair basketball using the Switch 2 mouse controls for controlling your character and motion controls for things like shooting the ball. This is where my problems with the game begin. The motion controls were actually surprisingly accurate and responsive. I never had an issue shooting the ball. However, I did have a problem with the dual mouse controls. Nintendo advertised the Switch 2 mouse controls as being able to work on most surfaces, so I decided to try them out on my chair in front of the TV. I found that while the controls did work more times than not, they also didn't feel all that great and would occasionally mess up inputs. The visual style, and style overall, is something that was heavily criticized when this game was first shown off. Nintendo has always found a way to add a creative spin on what would be a standard genre. Instead of making your usual third-person shooter, they made one where you play as Squid Kid hybrids that shoot ink that you can then swim through for unique movement and gameplay. This game has been heavily compared to ARMS from the Switch 1, which similarly took a standard concept of a boxing game and added the twist that you have really long arms that can reach across the ring. In stark contrast, Drag and Drive is just wheelchair basketball, which to be fair is a sport that doesn't have any other video game adaptations, but still. With something like this from Nintendo, you'd expect some twist, but aside from the controls and a not fun racing mode, there really isn't anything separating this from a regular 3-on-3 basketball game. The visuals also reflect this, but I'd like to take a moment to defend the visuals a little. Yes, there are parts of the game that look especially underbaked, especially in the textures, but for the most part, I really dig the underground feel this game has. Kinda reminds me of the old PS2 Tony Hawk games. Like I said in the intro, I did have some fun with this game. When the controls work, the game is really fun. The online for this game reminds me of the early days of Rocket League when no one really knew what they were doing and matches devolved into a fun, chaotic mess. As for the game's $20 price point, it's a little too much. I know complaining about $20 in an age where some games cost $80 is a little ridiculous, but considering the small amount of content and depth offered here, the game really should have been more in the $10 to $15 range. Also, it just got revealed that Hollow Knight Silksong, a game people have been waiting forever for, is going to be $20, and I can guarantee that that game will be much more worth the price. In summary, Drag and Drive is a fun game at times, but it's definitely not something I see myself returning to anytime soon. It really feels like something slapped together to advertise the dual mouse controls and nothing more. It's a tech demo disguised as a game, and while I can't say I hate it, I definitely can't say that I like it all that much either.
Action, please. Action awesome, please.
Just do anything?
No, it's sorry, cut. Yeah, rolling. 102, take 2.
Ah!
I was surprised when I heard the internet clamoring that a new adaptation of War of the Worlds was the worst film of 2025. Mainly because I had no idea they were making a new War of the Worlds, or that it would star Ice Cube. I'll cut right to the chase. This movie sucks. Like, I was hopeful this was going to be a fun, stupid film, but no. This was actively painful to watch. From the awful acting, to the headache-inducing editing, to the blatant product placement, let's get into the train wreck that is War of the Worlds. Here's your spoiler warning, if you care. The story follows Ice Cube reacting to YouTube videos of aliens taking over Earth, and if you're gonna say that's wrong, then you didn't watch the movie. The aliens are here to steal our data. What does that mean? I don't know, it means they eat your Facebook page or something, which, yes, that is something that directly happens in the movie. The plot of this movie is just all over the place, having way too many elements and not really focusing on any of them. There's a main plot with the aliens, a side plot with Ice Cube's daughter and son-in-law who works for Amazon, which is not the only time Amazon will be brought up in this review, another side plot with a group of hackers that disguise themselves with an easily removable voice modulator, and a whole load of other side plots that don't serve a purpose other than to make the film more confusing. And that confusion is only pushed further with this movie's annoying editing. This is one of those webcam found footage films. Now, I'm not a big fan of those movies personally, but usually the appeal of movies like that are how natural they're supposed to look, with very little editing and a mostly stationary camera. This movie didn't get that memo and decides to zoom in and pan across the screen with the energy of a toddler on Red Bull. Just looking at this movie hurts after a while, and it's not just the editing, but also the visuals. I guess now is a good time to talk about when this movie was made. This film began production in the middle of COVID, which is probably how this movie even exists in the first place. Everyone is acting on Zoom calls, which means the shot composition and colors look extremely bland. While I didn't like Unfriended, which is from the same director and in the same genre as this, that film at least tried to have a unique visual style, while this just looks so boring. And don't even get me started on the tripods. They're one of the most iconic looking alien designs ever, and this movie goes and makes them look like they belong in a mobile game ad. I mean, I get it's a streaming movie, but... Oh wait, it's a streaming movie. That reminds me, the Amazon product placement is everywhere, and it's so unapologetically forced. One of the major events of the climax is a character using Prime Air to get a USB stick to Ice Cube. It reminds me of when I talked about Madam Web and they killed the main villain of that movie with a Pepsi sign. I'm not even gonna talk about the gift card. But by far the worst part of this movie is also the only part I actually liked. Ironically, of course, but the acting is just hilarious to witness. Ice Cube just looks annoyed the whole time, even during moments when he should probably show a little more emotion than that. Everyone's acting is just completely emotionless, which I don't have to tell you really sucks when 80% of the runtime is staring at people's faces. In summary, what happened here? It seems like War of the Worlds was made as an easy way to get something out during the lockdown, but Amazon decided to show a little humanity and sealed this movie away for 5 years out of fear. I can only assume the movie eventually got released due to some sort of contractual obligation. Like, this movie didn't release. It escaped. This movie should be one that you and your friends could get in a group call and laugh at. But while I was watching it, I just felt nothing. And that's a shame, because honestly, I really wanted to laugh at it.
Is there anybody in here?
When I first heard about Weapons, it was because publications were claiming it was the scariest movie ever made, and after watching that terrifying trailer, I was inclined to agree. So when the film finally released, I was extremely excited. I haven't been properly scared by a horror movie in a while, so I was fully ready to walk out of the theater needing a change of pants. So, is this movie really that scary? The answer is yes, but only when it wants to be, because Weapons is as much a horror film as it is a comedy. Usually tonal whiplash in a movie like this would negatively affect my enjoyment, but this is one of the few movies I've seen that doesn't see its varying tone as a detriment, but instead as a tool. So, allow me to explain why you should watch Weapons. The story follows an elementary school teacher, played by Julia Gardner, whose class mysteriously disappears the night before. The movie swaps between various different characters who all play into unraveling the mystery of what happened to the kids. I think this movie can be summed up perfectly in one scene. Minor spoilers ahead. There was a dream sequence in this movie which genuinely had me petrified with its masterful use of tension and an actually well done jump scare. And you could feel the energy in the theater. Everyone was on edge. And then, when the jump scare happened and the character woke up and proceeded to scream one of the most realistic what the fucks I've ever heard, the whole theater proceeded to erupt in laughter. With the first few funny moments, I thought, oh no, I'm laughing. Other people are laughing. Is this movie not as good as people were saying? But as the movie went on, it became incredibly clear that these comedic moments were 100% intentional to not only give the audience a breather from the scares, but also make the horror hit so much more when it showed up again. The story was incredibly interesting and had me glued to the screen the whole time. I won't spoil anything here, but the way the movie unveils its mystery is insanely well done. The acting and characters are also really good, with some of the most realistic performances I've seen this year. Like, these characters feel like real people, which is hard to pull off, especially in horror. If there's one issue I have with the movie, it's that sections of it are way too dark. Not in tone, but visually. At times, it has the issue a lot of horror films have of attempting to hide things in the dark, but accidentally making it hard for the audience to even tell what's happening. Luckily, I could keep up with it on a big screen in a dark theater, but if you're going to watch or rewatch the movie at home on a TV, I could see how it could be hard to follow. Overall, though, it's not a big deal. just a little annoying. In summary, Weapons was a movie that really surprised me, which I can't say for a lot of films. It does what I love most about film in general and gives a peek into the mind of a creative director. I haven't seen Zach Krieger's other works, but I know a lot of people really like Barbarian, and I also know he's currently making a Resident Evil movie. While I have no idea how that's going to turn out, I do have a little bit of hope after seeing this. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should watch Weapons.
Now what?
E3 2019. I think it would be an understatement to say that a lot has changed since then. We went through a whole pandemic, Nintendo has a new console out now, I started a YouTube channel, thanks for 200 subs by the way, and a whole lot more. I remember watching E3 2019, aka the last real E3 before it got taken out back and replaced with the Summer Game Fest. And amid all the Forza cars on stage and Keanu Reeves calling someone breathtaking and battle royales being put in Fallout 76, there was the announcement of a sequel to one of the best indie games of 2017, Hollow Knight Silksong. Originally planned as a DLC for the first game that ballooned into being its own thing, it was announced at the showcase that it would be coming very soon. Very soon turned into 6 years. Myself and many others were curious as to why Team Cherry has taken so long to release the game, and instead of giving the usual reasons of creative differences or development hell or COVID problems, they said it took that long because they were just having too much fun making it. So, after many years cooking in the kitchen, expectations were notably high, and I feel all the joy in the world when I say that not only does this game live up to the hype, but exceeds it by a large margin. So allow me to explain why you should play Hollow Knight Silksong. I don't think I've played a game that has made me this viscerally angry, and yet I kept playing it because of the simple joy I felt when exploring. That's something that other Souls-likes haven't made me feel. Usually I play until I hit a wall and then stop playing and come back the next day. Everything from the beautiful music, the slick movement, the fun NPCs, and the amazing art and animations made just wandering around the world fun. Of course, this game has the mainstay of Souls-likes, which is the tough-as-nails boss fights, and man, these are really something else. At time of writing, I've only gotten to the start of Act 2, but the fights so far have been incredibly difficult, but not to an insane degree, and I loved mastering some of these bosses. Note, this is coming from someone who hasn't really gotten into Souls-likes until very recently. The difficulty has been a hot topic of discussion surrounding this game. My stance on it is that, personally, I found the difficulty to be fairly balanced. Unlike Hollow Knight, there are certain enemies that deal 2 times the damage in Silksong. However, instead of healing yourself slowly, 1 mask at a time, you press a button and heal 3 masks. And as for the down slash, get good. Originally, I was annoyed with the new down slash and just wanted my pogo back, but after a while, I started to get used to it and understand how it works. And once I did that, a whole new world opened up to me and what I could do with it. But it is nice that Team Cherry offered the option of having the pogo back for players who just want to use that. I think it's crazy how Team Cherry has done something that all sequels wish they could do. Feel like a brand new game, while also feeling like more of the same. Every aspect of the original Hollow Knight is expanded upon in ways that feel natural, and not just being changed for the sake of change. I do have one issue with the game. The runbacks are pretty bad. I said before that I have no problem with the enemies doing more damage, but that part of the game does get a little aggravating when you fail an attempt at a boss and have to walk from your last checkpoint all the way back to the boss room to try again, only to be met with a horde of enemies that take almost half your health. It's a pretty big issue, and one that could be solved by placing benches just a little bit closer to some of the boss rooms. Like, not even directly outside, but just close enough that I don't feel like I have to run a marathon to try a fight again. This hasn't ruined the game for me, but it is undoubtedly annoying. In summary, Hollow Knight Silksong is the only game this year that can have me slamming my controller into my desk 1 minute and the biggest smile on my face the next minute. No matter how hard the game gets, there's always something that keeps you going, and it might just be the world that Team Cherry has created. I really want to beat this game, which means I'm going to be playing this game after the review period, and a game that can get me to do that has something really special going on. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should play Hollow Knight Silksong. I was not planning to watch this movie. Just the name K-pop Demon Hunters is the most bargain bin movie name I think I've ever heard. But I decided to give it a shot recently because everyone, and I mean everyone, was talking about this film and giving it high praise. After watching it, yeah, it's good. I was shocked as to how well made this movie was. While I didn't fall in love with it like so many others have, I can definitely respect the quality of filmmaking presented here. I even like the music, which I wasn't expecting as someone who isn't into K-pop. It definitely deserves all the praise it's been getting, but it isn't without its flaws. So let's get into K-pop Demon Hunters. The thing that I heard everyone talking about when it came to this film was the animation. The visuals utilize the popular 2D, 3D look, which means it looks super expressive at times while also looking beautiful. Fight scenes are wonderfully choreographed and shot, and the impact of the fights are helped greatly by the music. I wasn't expecting to enjoy the soundtrack of this movie as much as I did, but the music worked well for me. Well, except Soda Pop, but I think that song is supposed to suck. The film's greatest strengths, however, are also its biggest issue: the story and characters. I enjoyed the fun yet emotional energy the story and characters radiated, but felt as if both needed a little more to do. The story moves at an incredibly fast pace, and the movie introduces so many different characters with their own stories, but doesn't elaborate enough on any of them aside from a select few. It definitely could have benefited from being a show rather than a movie, giving these characters a little more time to develop fully. Now, Netflix is planning a sequel to K-pop Demon Hunters. I mean, of course they are. This is literally the highest streamed anything on the platform, and maybe they can further flesh out the other characters in that, but for right now it feels a little lacking. In summary, K-pop Demon Hunters is a really good movie, and I can tell why so many people have praised it. The film overall seems like a solid proof of concept, and while I can't say I'm fully on board with this universe yet, if they continue to develop this world further, they could have something really great on their hands.
Just know that tomorrow morning before school, you're gonna be mad because you didn't take a bath.
Bloober Team is an infamous name in the horror game space. Previously known for games like Layers of Fear and The Medium, myself and many others were more than a little worried when it was announced that they were going to be the team behind the Silent Hill 2 remake. But thankfully, Bloober Team managed to pull it off, and that game ended up actually being good. Still, I went into this team's next game, Chronos: The New Dawn, with a little hesitancy. With Silent Hill 2, Bloober proved that they could make a good horror game, but that game was a remake, and a pretty faithful one at that. I wanted to see if these devs could make a good game with an original IP, without having the blueprint of an already great game. So, after playing Chronos, I can happily say that it's really good. I do have some issues with it, but for the most part, this game was the final exam for Bloober Team, and at least for me, they passed. So let's get into Chronos: The New Dawn. I wanted to start off by saying this game on the surface is the most unoriginal horror game ever, but as I kept playing, it became clear to me that this game is so unoriginal and takes from so many other games that it actually wraps back around into being original. The gameplay is reminiscent of games like the Resident Evil 2 remake and Dead Space, with a story and characters similar to Silent Hill. You know, characters all speak in either cryptic drones or crazed ramblings. The visuals of this game are wonderfully weird, yet beautiful, and the sound design makes the guns and tools feel weighty. I will say I never felt scared playing the game, but that doesn't take away any points from the game itself. It's still fun at the end of the day. Maybe it just has something to do with your main character's bobblehead looking design. As I said before, this game uses a lot of elements from other survival horror games, but they're all done incredibly well, even bringing back a sort of Crimson Head mechanic, with you having to burn enemies after you kill them or else other enemies can bring them back, but stronger. I'm overall pleased with the direction the studio seems to be heading in, and I really can't wait for their Silent Hill 1 remake, as unlike Silent Hill 2, I know that game could actually greatly benefit from a remake. In summary, Chronos: The New Dawn is a surprisingly simple game, but sometimes that's all I really need. In other words, this and Silent Hill F should tide me over until Resident Evil Requiem. I can instantly tell when a movie is going to be labeled "you should watch" if it affects me emotionally. After watching The Long Walk, I left the theater with my heart practically pounding out of my chest. This movie is a masterclass in building tension and knowing when to relieve it, with a great story and characters to boot. I thought this movie looked good from the trailer, but nothing could really prepare me for just how much I love this film. So let's not waste any more time and get into why you should watch The Long Walk. The story follows a group of 50 teens from each of the United States who are competing in an annual physical challenge named the Long Walk. They have to keep walking above the speed of at least 3 miles per hour. If they fall under that speed, they get a warning. 3 warnings and they get shot. Warnings can be taken away after walking for an hour. Keep walking until one person remains. Such a simple premise for a story, but such a genius one. It's easy to imagine yourself in this situation and wonder how far you would make it. It's something that other similar dystopian stories feature, but it works especially well here considering just how simple the premise is. Speaking of which, the director of this movie is Francis Lawrence, who made a majority of the Hunger Games movies, and that's probably why he got picked. He's got experience with this type of thing. This movie does something I wasn't expecting it to. At the start, I repeatedly told myself, don't get attached to any of these characters because I knew most of them were going to get killed. And yet, I still ended up getting attached anyway due to just how well written the characters were, which made it hurt all the more when they eventually got taken out. Watching this film, especially in the theater, is incredibly tense, but the movie never overindulges in its dark atmosphere. It knows when to lighten the mood and when to have quiet moments. It knows when to show the kills and when to just imply them. My eyes were glued to the screen the entire time. And that ending, just wow. I won't spoil it here, and I know it's by far the biggest change from the book, but I personally thought it wrapped up everything perfectly. But I think the most impressive aspect of this film is the sound design. The echoes of gunshots ringing out across an empty road, the oppressive and ever-present announcer constantly serving as a reminder of what's to come, and just the sounds of shoes and boots all marching together on concrete. It's very subtle, but the sound design to me is the most important aspect of why this movie works so well. I do have one issue with the film, but it's not really an issue. The Long Walk isn't very rewatchable. Shocking, I know. Usually for anything that gets the "you should watch" label, I like to rewatch it as soon as it's available on streaming, but I don't know if I'm ready to go through this again. I might need to wait a little bit before I give it a second viewing, but that's not really an issue. I mean, it wanted me to feel uncomfortable. Mission accomplished. In summary, The Long Walk is easily a contender for my top 5 movies of 2025. I don't know where in that list it sits, but it's got a high probability of making it in. I'd happily recommend this to anyone looking for an example of how to perfect bone-chilling tension and great storytelling. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should watch The Long Walk.
And get a load of this page! R!
Silent Hill for a while was not looking the greatest. After Konami issued the 1-2 punch that was canceling Silent Hills and focusing development on pachinko machines, it's safe to say that fans of the franchise were devastated. At least I assume they were. I wouldn't know, I only recently got into the franchise. And now, Konami seems to be in the process of reviving Silent Hill. Their plan? To get, dear God, anyone but them to make the games. To start off this revival, they got Bloober Team to make the Silent Hill 2 remake, and in a surprising turn of events, that game ended up actually being good. But just like I said in my Chronos video, while that game was good, it was building off the blueprint of the original. Silent Hill F is the first game in the revival effort to be fully original. So now we come to the question, is it any good? Well, let's get right into Silent Hill F. Let's just go through the checklist here. Small town covered in fog, check. Clunky melee combat, check. Creepy enemies that twitch a lot, check. All in all, it seems like a pretty normal Silent Hill. Oh. Well, that's different. Yeah, this is the first Silent Hill game set in Japan. Usually the franchise is set in the fictional town of Silent Hill, Maine. The new location actually greatly helps in the horror aspect, as it makes the setting feel familiar for those who've played the other entries, while also being something new. Starting with the positives, the visuals of this game are beautifully bizarre. Both the town sections and the otherworldly sections have standout environment design. I also found myself engaged with the story and characters. I mean, I didn't really understand what was happening most of the time, but I was still intrigued nonetheless. Besides, being confused by a Silent Hill story is just part of the experience. As for the negatives, I would say the combat is slow and not very satisfying, but again, that's part of the charm of this series. Now, an actual negative I have with the game is the performance. I was on PC and my game for the most part ran at 60 FPS no problem, but it would frequently dip and freeze at times. The cutscenes seemed to be strangely locked at 30 FPS, which made some transitions into gameplay a bit jarring. And finally, I had this horrible visual bug where my game window would shrink and get static around the edges. I checked online to see if I could fix it and found out it was tied to motion blur. So I have two options. Turn the beautiful visuals this game has into a blurry mess anytime I move the camera, or suffer a seizure. Luckily, these bugs and issues can be patched, but right now it is a bit of a mess. But are there any issues that can't be patched? Well, I will say that the game was a little over-reliant on the otherworldly parts of the game. I personally found the town sections to be way scarier, and while I don't have a problem with the other section, I do wish the game was a little bit more balanced between the two. I overall had a good time with the game, but these were just some minor gripes I had. In summary, Silent Hill F was a great game to get me into the spooky mood, and though I may have some issues with it, I'd still recommend anyone who's a fan of survival horror pick it up. Just maybe wait a bit before getting it on PC.
And poke! Don't fall! One! Come on, Elise!
Sonic, what do you think you're going, you mother?
Oh boy, time to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog. Technically, I've talked about this franchise before, but 1, that was a movie, and 2, it was in a collection video so no one watched it. So yes, this is my first real review of a Sonic game, specifically a Sonic racing game, which is a spin-off series that I have a little history with. Excluding this game, I've only ever played Sonic and All-Stars Racing on the Xbox 360. A big talking point surrounding this game is just how superior it is to Mario Kart World, and I was curious as to what I would think of it as one of the few people who actually liked that game. So what did I think of it? Well, let's answer that question and get right into Sonic Racing Crossworlds. I'll lay all the cards on the table right now. Comparing Crossworlds to World is tricky. Overall, I'd consider Mario Kart to be the more polished game, with tighter controls when compared to Sonic's looser feeling gameplay and vibrant and expressive animations for even minor characters like a Goomba, whereas Sonic Racing's animations all look like they belong in bowling alleys. That being said, I'd also say that Sonic Racing Crossworlds was the more consistent of the two games, with Mario Kart's weird voting system and boring open world making it harder to jump in for a quick game. Sonic Racing also has the more appealing gimmick to me, that being the Crossworlds. Each race is split into the usual 3 laps, with the second lap teleporting you to a totally different track using an almost seamless transition through a portal. That's genius, and on top of that, there's a blend of RNG and skill attached to this mechanic. On the second lap, the player in first has the choice of teleporting everyone to either a predetermined or random track. It adds the random element of which tracks will be available, but also has skill involved with you wanting to be first so you can have some agency as to where you and the other players will go. Comparing this to Mario Kart's gimmick of a flat open world with copy-pasted missions, there's no contest as to which one is more intriguing. The visuals are hit and miss for me. Like I said, Sonic and his pals all animate like you just got a strike with fitting voice lines to boot, but all the tracks themselves are absolutely gorgeous. Psst, these next 2 bits aren't really complaints, but just nitpicks I have with the game. The music is, well, it's Sonic music, so yeah, as expected, almost every song is a bop. I say almost because when I first loaded up the game, I watched the opening cutscene and laughed for like a minute straight at the absurd lyrics. And now, dear viewer, allow me to enlighten your ears with some of these lyrics. Here we go, time to blow, here we go, fast like whoa. Set your goals, steal their souls. I guess Shadow wrote that one. You get the point. I've seen several individuals online say the song's lyrics sound AI generated, and while I do agree it sounds that way, I don't think it actually is. It just sucks. But what about the single player? Well, I didn't really engage with the single player, probably because of this game's other new feature being the rival system. In single player Grand Prix, you'll be assigned a rival, who you'll have to beat. If you beat them, then you get rewards. This is a fine idea to add some incentive to replay the Grand Prix rather than the usual gold cup them all and move on, but while playing it, I kept thinking, man, I wish I could just play the game without having to worry about the rival system, but the only way to do that is in multiplayer. You can't turn off the rivals. Okay, out of the nitpicks, back to the critiques. Like I said at the start, the controls feel really loose, and drifting isn't as satisfying as I want it to be, even using a high handling build. The controls are still manageable, like they work, but they definitely need some tightening up. Kind of felt like I was playing one of those arcade racers where the steering wheels always seem a little broken and oversensitive, or is that just the arcades I go to? One more thing before we wrap this video up. The trick system. Why don't more games do this? Hitting Tony Hawk style combos after tricking off a ramp is so intuitive and fun, and to my knowledge, the only games that use this are the Sonic racing games and the surprisingly good Cars tie-in games. Basically, I want to see more kart racers do this. In summary, my answer to the question of is this game better than Mario Kart World is it depends. I think I overall liked my time with Mario Kart more, but I'll probably come back to Cross Worlds more often. I'd definitely recommend most people play this game over Mario Kart, mainly because you don't have to pay $500 for this one, but also because it's way more approachable in nature. It's exactly what you expect it to be. And honestly, that's not a bad thing.
Mais qu'est-ce que tu chantes? Les paroles de la chanson. Burger, nuggets, nuggets, burger.
I loved it when Jared Leto said it's Troning time and Ares all over the place. There, now that we got the obvious joke out of the way, I recently watched the first two Tron movies before seeing Ares and talked about them in my What's Happening video, and if you're interested in what I thought about those two movies, then go check that video out. But for those who want a quick summary, I thought Legacy was pretty good aside from a forgettable story and hit and miss CGI, and the original literally hurt to watch. After watching those two films though, I was curious as to how Ares would go about presenting its premise of the digital world coming to the real world, considering that was entirely what the second movie was focused on stopping. So, how did they address it? Well, they didn't, so my time wondering was just wasted. Tron Ares has been getting a lot of negative feedback, with some claiming it's one of the worst movies of this year, to which I respond, have you seen the other films released this year? Sure, Tron Ares is a bad movie, but I don't think I would put it in the top 10 worst movies of this year, which has movies like The Electric State, War of the Worlds, and the Lilo and Stitch remake, just to name a few. I know it sounds like I'm defending this movie. I'm not. There are elements of this movie that actually work well, but there's also a lot that makes this film fall flat on its face. So let's get into the clutter that is Tron Ares. Let's start with what I like about the movie. The visuals are still really good, essentially just using Tron Legacy's art direction again. But the best part of the film is undoubtedly the soundtrack. I think I still prefer Daft Punk's work on Legacy more, but Nine Inch Nails does a really great job here too, offering a deeper sound compared to Legacy's softer melodies. And that's all I liked. Yeah, not a whole lot. Okay, now for the negatives. The story is all over the place. It feels like two different scripts were smashed together, with the film ditching its established villain halfway through for a villain that doesn't have much in terms of setup. Most of the movie is a standard action flick, but then it'll suddenly switch up and become a buddy movie for a bit before ditching that idea. Then there's the part where... oh wait, here's your spoiler warning. Got it? Okay, good. Then there's the part where Ares goes to a recreation of the original 80s film and meets Jeff Bridges, but that only lasts about 3 minutes and is definitely just there for nostalgia bait. But by far the worst aspect of the film is the acting. Obviously, Jared Leto doesn't give a great performance, but he is playing an AI, so you could just say his usual wooden acting is just him playing the character like a robot on purpose. But then there's Greta Lee, who plays Eve Kim, who serves as a sort of secondary main character. I'm not super familiar with her work, so I don't know if it's just her giving a poor performance or if it's the fault of the director, but she somehow manages to sound more robotic and stilted than the actual AI in this film. All of the acting ranges from passable to pretty bad. I wouldn't say any of the acting in this movie is downright awful, but honestly, I kinda would have preferred if it was. At least then it would have a so bad it's good kind of quality to it. In summary, Tron Ares is a movie that looks and sounds great, but that's about it, with sloppy storytelling and mediocre acting. And that's got me thinking. There's a type of movie that the internet likes to call a phone scroller, but that name is stupid, so how about a rebrand? So, I'm proud to dub Tron Ares as a poolside film. In some hotels that have pools, they have a TV next to the pool that's usually running the news or sports or sometimes even movies. Poolside films are movies whose job it is to just look and sound good. You know, make for nice background noise. And the quality of the plots of these types of movies don't matter because no one is going to the pool to watch a movie. They're movies with all style and no substance. And honestly, I couldn't think of a better description for Tron Ares.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah.
Oh boy. If you've been around this channel at all, then you might have noticed that I use a color-coded system for my thumbnails. Green means I liked it, yellow means I didn't feel positive or negative towards it, and red means I didn't like it. If you noticed that, then you might have also noticed that I haven't done a red review for a video game this year. I've done a couple yellow reviews, but not red. I knew it couldn't stay that way forever. I knew I had to review a game that I didn't like eventually, but I could have never predicted that the first game of this year to do that would be Little Nightmares 3. As someone who just likes the first two games, this is a massive disappointment. I can only imagine what this game is like to someone who loves the series. Oh wait, I don't have to imagine it, because the Duke is a big fan of Little Nightmares. Hey Duke, what do you think of Little Nightmares 3?
It sucked.
Well, there you go. But why do I not like this game, you ask? Well, let's discuss just that and get right into the mess that is Little Nightmares 3. Let's start with what I like and dislike about the previous two games. For me, the biggest selling point of this franchise has always been its world, storytelling, and art direction. The first two games feature beautiful backgrounds and environmental storytelling, with deceptively simple stories that give way to big reveals and twists. The gameplay, however, never really impressed me. I'm not a fan of the trial and error gameplay where you have to do everything the game wants you to do perfectly during chase sequences and stealth sections, meaning you have to die at least once. Dying in a horror game immediately takes away all of the tension. The best horror games provide a challenge, but also clearly communicate with the player to make sure that they understand what's happening so they don't die and tension isn't lost. Little Nightmares controls have also never felt right to me, with jumping and running always feeling like your character is either doing too much or not enough, which leads to frustration. Frustration not at all helped by the lack of depth perception with the camera angles, leading to an increase of jumps where it looks like you're gonna make it, only for your character to actually be a little too far to the left or right, causing you to miss and either die or have to redo the jump again depending on the type of jump. Okay, so now you know what I like and don't like about Little Nightmares as a franchise. So how does Little Nightmares 3 compare? Did you not hear the intro? This game isn't made by the same developers as the first two, Tertiary Studios, and is instead made by the developers of Until Dawn, Supermassive Games, and it shows. Everything from the visuals to the gameplay feels like it's trying to replicate the original games and failing, especially the visuals. While the environments and models don't look bad, they feel super disjointed, which isn't helped by the game's structure. Each section of this game starts with you exiting a mirror and having to get to another mirror at the end of the section. Each of these sections have different locations and enemies to avoid. This design philosophy, unlike the first two, makes these locations feel more like just video game levels and not an actual living, breathing world. The gameplay is even worse. The focus of this game is the inclusion of a two-player co-op mode, which is how me and the Duke were going to play this game before realizing that it was only online multiplayer. That's ridiculous, especially considering Reanimal, the next game from Tertiary Studios, is also going to be two-player and is going to include a couch co-op mode. So I had to play this game with the other character being controlled by this game's sorry excuse for an AI. Seriously, there are sections where you and the other player need to work together to defeat a group of enemies. For example, spoiler warning from here on out by the way, there's a part of the game where there's these dolls attacking us, and I had to shoot off their heads with my character's bow and outrun the doll's body while the AI smashed the head. At least that's what it was supposed to do, but the AI seemed to find bugging out and running in place to be more invigorating. I swear, this game took me 5 hours to beat, but if the buggy AI hasn't caused me to die so many times, I probably could have beaten it in 3. And none of that is helped by the controls, which made these combat sections feel like I was playing It Takes Two with a forklift. And then there's the underwhelming story. The whole game is you playing as Bird Boy and Goggle Girl, who have to travel through mirrors to escape the nightmare realm they're in. During certain parts of the game, you see into Bird Boy's cryptic backstory. I assume this was because I picked Bird Boy to play as, but no, this is just what everyone sees. At the end of the game, you and Goggle Girl are about to go through the final mirror and go back to the real world, when the mirror suddenly spits out Goggle Girl, and it's revealed that she was never real and just an imaginary friend made up by Bird Boy. This twist doesn't really do much for me. It's not a bad twist, but it doesn't really change how I see the story. Maybe it was to make the ending more sad because now the two will never be together again, but if Goggle Girl was fake the whole time, then couldn't Bird Boy just imagine her in the real world? Then again, I'm not caught up with the lore, so take what I say with a grain of salt. The game drops these hints to the twist throughout the game to build intrigue, but when all was finally revealed, I just kinda didn't care, and I think that's emblematic of the whole game. The game didn't get me to care about anything we were doing, which made the whole experience boring to get through. In summary, I didn't think I would have this much to say about Little Nightmares 3, but I did. Unfortunately. Bandai Namco seems to be going all in with Little Nightmares right now, with the release of this game, a VR game, and a TV show, and I can only hope that those other projects end up being better executed than this. If you're a hardcore Little Nightmares fan, I'd recommend saving your money until Reanimal comes out next year.
That's a tank!
Battlefield hasn't been in a great spot for a while now. That's a phrase I feel like I've been saying a lot this year, not about Battlefield, but about other stuff. The last truly great game was Battlefield 1 in 2016. After that game's massive success, EA and DICE proceeded to fumble Battlefield 5, and if Battlefield 5 was considered a fumble, then I don't know what you call the disastrous launch of 2042 after getting people hyped up with its amazing trailer. So when Battlefield 6 got announced, I was obviously skeptical. Fool me once, shame on me, and all that. But then I played the open beta, and it was amazing. I felt like I was actually playing a Battlefield game again and not a game trying to chase popular trends. That being said, I was still a little on edge because for all I knew, they could totally botch the game after the beta with some update. So now that the game is actually out, how is it? I'm happy to say that while it isn't without its faults, Battlefield 6 is a true return to glory for the franchise. So allow me to explain what I mean as we dive into Battlefield 6. Before we get into why this game rocks, we need to talk about the biggest issue the game has: the single player. Now for me, when it comes to the two big military shooters, Battlefield lives or dies by its multiplayer and Call of Duty lives or dies by its single player. I don't go to Battlefield for the campaign and I don't go to COD for the multiplayer. That being said, just because I don't really care about Battlefield story mode, that doesn't give it the excuse to be bad, and Battlefield 6's campaign is one of the most generic shooter campaigns I've played in a while. It feels like it's just going through the motions with a basic plot and easy missions, which are made even easier by the fact that your AI companions can now revive you up to 3 times per level. It's nice that Battlefield 6 actually has a campaign after the lack of a single player in 2042, but I would have preferred more effort be put into it because I know Battlefield can have a good story considering Battlefield 1 had good single player missions. But that's really the only negative I have with the game. Other problems like the sluggish progression are currently being patched as I write this review. So now, on to the best part of the game. The multiplayer is super addictive and returns to the basics of the franchise. There's no Overwatch-style heroes this time around, it's just you and your team. Most of my time playing this game was in the multiplayer, and every time I would play the single player, I would just play it for like a mission or two and then be drawn back into the multiplayer. I mainly play support. Don't worry, I'm a good support. I don't just stand over dead teammates asking for a revive, and I don't rush into open fire and die trying to revive people. There's a bunch of adjectives I could use to describe this game's multiplayer, but I think the most important one I could use is fun. It was fun capturing and holding objectives, helping teammates out of a situation, using the chaotic but fun vehicles. Everything was just fun. In summary, Battlefield 6 is a refreshing win for a franchise that's been in the mud for a bit. I do want to say though, all the praise I'm giving this game goes to the developers, and not EA. While it's not perfect, the team at Battlefield Studios has really done a great job recapturing the magic of the series, and though I don't know how long it'll stay that way, I can definitely say that for the time being, Battlefield is back.
Early Sunday morning, right here along Miles Road, a jogger saw what they thought was a black bear, immediately called police, but when police showed up, no sign of the bear.
A few minutes later, the bear was spotted behind this home in Moreland Hills. This recreation identifies how witnesses say the bear escaped into the woods.
I don't like Pokemon, and I take a guess, unless you're a die-hard fan, that you don't like it either. Which is weird because when I was younger, I loved Pokemon. I had a bunch of the plushes, I watched the anime, and my very first game I got with my 3DS was Pokemon Moon. But as I grew older, I grew out of Pokemon, specifically with the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield, which was the first mainline game in the franchise on a console, and yet it still looked like it belonged on the 3DS, and on top of that it had mind-numbingly boring gameplay. The only Pokemon game in recent memory that I actually liked was Pokemon Legends Arceus, with its new direction and more free-flowing gameplay, so I was a little hopeful that Pokemon Legends ZA would be good. Unfortunately, that was not the case. It takes the formula I liked from Arceus and dumbs down its freedom into a super linear game that holds your hand for the entirety of its main boring gameplay loop. So, let's get into Pokemon Legends ZA. I find modern Pokemon's bizarre difficulty fascinating. Most games start easy and progressively ramp up in difficulty, while others start difficult and, either due to abilities or experience the player gains, gets easier over time. Pokemon Legends ZA starts easy and gets easier over time. You'll go from killing everything in 3 shots with just your starter Pokemon to one-shotting everything with just your starter Pokemon. In turn, the main gameplay loop is incredibly boring. The most fun I had with this game was running around the wild zones collecting all the different Pokemon, but even that is incredibly limiting compared to Legends Arceus' open world, and after a while, it too became boring. The thing everyone has been talking about with this game is the lack of polish on display. This has been the case for a while now, but Game Freak, owners of the highest grossing media franchise ever, are still making games with these low quality textures. The game also has pretty well animated cutscenes, but they're made ultimately awkward by the exclusion of voice acting. It's even weirder when you consider that these cutscenes are lip synced. Why would you go through the effort of making these characters' mouths match what they're saying, and then not have them speak? I just think back to Breath of the Wild from 2017, with its gorgeous visuals, fun gameplay, and, well, not good voice acting, but still voice acting nonetheless, and Game Freak can't even manage a fraction of that in 2025 and with new hardware available. They've been repeatedly getting beaten out by not only other Nintendo devs, but also other Pokemon developers like Bandai Namco with games like Pokken and New Pokemon Snap. This game serves as just another example of Game Freak's laziness, and that laziness was made even worse by them trying to charge $30 for the DLC to this game before it even came out. In summary, Pokemon Legends ZA is just another poor outing from Game Freak. It's even worse because this year has had a few really big RPG releases. It seemed like Pokemon was moving forward with Legends Arceus, even if just a little bit, so to see a follow-up to that game regress so much is just plain disappointing.
Oh, by the way, how much TNT did you put down?
Just a little bit.
What's a little bit?
10,000?
Yeah, what? 10,000! My PC!
I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of the Predator films. I really enjoyed the first movie, but never felt inclined to check out the others. But I did watch 2022's Prey and thought it was pretty good. Not great by any means, but good. So I was intrigued when I heard that the director of that was going to do another film called Prey No Man's Land, which would reportedly follow a predator hunting in the trenches of World War I. This is not that, this is Predator Badlands. When this was first shown off, I didn't really know what to think, aside from how goofy the design of the Predator looked. But I've actually had a good track record this year with movies that I didn't know what to think of them from their trailers. So how is it? It's fine. It's not a very interesting film, but it does what it sets out to do. Allow me to explain what I mean as we dive into Predator Badlands. The movie follows a predator named Deck, who's the runt of his clan, and so has to prove himself worthy by traveling to another planet and hunting down a creature called a Kalisk. On his journey, he runs across a Wayland synth named Thea, who knows a lot about the planet but is missing her legs. Now the two have to work together so that Deck can get his prey and Thea can get her legs back, all while another synth named Tessa is sent to the planet to track down the predator and retrieve Thea. Let's start with what this film does right. The action is pretty fun. It does get a little goofy near the climax, but for the most part the action is grounded and well done. It's helped out greatly by the amazing sound design and sometimes great visuals. I say sometimes because there are parts of the film that look a little rough, but for the most part it's fairly impressive looking. And that's really where my praises end. I found the characters and story to be pretty forgettable. You've seen these characters done before, you know? The fun, cheerful one contrasted by the stoic, brooding one who have to work together despite their differences. There's nothing inherently wrong with using characters that have been done before, but it can lead to a less memorable experience if you don't do them really well. I think my biggest issue with the characters stems from Thea, who provides a lot of the film's comedy, and I say it in air quotes because I found what she said to be less funny and more annoying. I will give credit to the actress that she does work well with a lot of the more serious moments in the movie, but I just didn't buy into her character when it felt like the movie really wanted me to. The story did end up taking some twists and turns I wasn't expecting, especially near the end, but for the most part, it's a standard adventure romp, which honestly feels like exactly what it was trying to be. In summary, I, ironically, didn't find anything bad about Predator Badlands. I wouldn't say I liked the film, but I don't dislike it either. It's a movie with good visuals, sound design, and action, with serviceable, if forgettable, characters and story. I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is a poolside film like Tron Ares, because at the very least, I could see someone getting into this plot and these characters where I didn't. If you're looking for a way to kill a couple of hours with some good action, then this will serve fine enough. I just personally prefer a little more meat to my action flicks. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to wrap up this video so I can gush about.
Before time began, there was the Cube.
Man, I miss Telltale. They weren't the best company, in fact, they had a whole bunch of issues, but when Telltale was at its best, they provided some of the greatest stories ever told in gaming. I'm sure you don't need to be reminded of what happened to Telltale, but in case you do, here's a rundown. Telltale Games, started by ex-LucasArts devs, made episodic adventure games being founded in 2004 and getting shut down in 2018 due to many varying factors. Oversaturating the market, spreading the developers too thin, all while spending loads of money licensing popular IPs. Since then, Telltale has resurfaced, but in the time after their arrival, they've put out one game and teased another game. That being The Wolf Among Us 2, which has been in development hell for a while now. But out of all the pain and suffering this studio has gone through, comes a new dev team called Ad Hoc Studios, who is a team that's made up of people that used to work at Telltale and were previously tasked with helping in the development of Wolf Among Us 2. Most importantly, this studio is helmed by Nick Herman, who before this directed some of the most beloved Telltale games. So now, Ad Hoc has published their first game in partnership with Critical Role called Dispatch, a superhero workplace comedy separated into two sections, the usual Telltale gameplay of making tough choices under a limited time, and the Dispatch gameplay of choosing which of your heroes is right for the task that pop up all over the city. This game really caught my eye when it was first shown off at the Game Awards, and I'm happy to say that not only has it lived up to the hype, but it's also one of my favorite games of this year. So let's get into why you should play Dispatch. Before we get into all the reasons I like this game, I should mention the one thing I think this game should have had that would have improved it. A game over screen. I get this game is going for more of a visual novel style rather than a point-and-click adventure, but I feel like there should have been a little bit of pushback. I'm not asking for the game to be more difficult or anything, I just feel like there should be some consequences for failing the gameplay sections. Plus, considering how funny and creative this game is, I feel like this team could have come up with some really great game over screens. But, other than that, I love this game. Starting with the thing that got everyone talking about it, the voice cast. It's pretty strange. Having big name stars like Aaron Paul and Jeffrey Wright, professional voice actors like Laura Bailey and Matthew Mercer, and just straight up YouTubers like Jacksepticeye and Moist Critical. And the most bizarre thing about all of this is that all of the voices fit. Sure, some performances are clearly better than others, but everyone's voice fits their character perfectly. And the performances are helped out greatly by the phenomenal writing and storytelling. Like I said before, this game was mainly directed by Nick Herman, and man do I miss this level of writing. It's not all amazing, as there are some lines here and there that are either cringeworthy or just don't make sense, like in what world is this a dad bod? But for the most part, the writing can be incredibly funny, but also heartfelt and dramatic when it wants to be. I also really liked the gameplay, not only the choices, but also the dispatching sections themselves. It's oddly satisfying sending out the right hero for the right job, and it honestly made me consider picking up some other games that use this style, like the This Is the Police games, which this is apparently very similar to. But speaking of choices, I saw a lot of people online saying that the choices really don't matter like the other Telltale games, and you can only change a few things. While that is true, I think there's a little more to it than that. Your choices only have a minor impact on story, but they majorly affect gameplay. For example, minor spoilers, in one of the early episodes, you're told that you have to cut one of two characters on your team, and how difficult your next shift will be is dependent on who you cut. There are multiple moments like this, and it adds a lot by interweaving gameplay with story. I've seen this game described as a playable show, but it's so much more than that. It's a show that uses the interactive nature of the medium of video games to elevate its narrative, and that's what makes it so special. In summary, I love Dispatch. It's definitely in my top 5 games of this year. I don't know where yet, but it's there. I hope Ad Hoc learns from Telltale's mistakes and takes their time with their next game, which is based on Critical Role. I also hope that whatever Telltale themselves is planning to do with The Wolf Among Us 2 is worth it, because now they have some pretty big competition. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should play Dispatch.
Of course, I'm sure we'll get along splendidly. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to embarrass you, but I'm a rather brilliant surgeon. Perhaps I could help you with that hump.
What hump?
Yeah, I know I'm late to this, but it just came out on Netflix, so I don't care. I didn't know if I was going to review this movie. I didn't even know if I was going to watch it. Not because of anything wrong with the film, but just because this year is winding down and I'm trying to give myself less work for the holidays. It's been a rough year. But boy, am I glad I ended up giving this movie a watch, because I absolutely love it. Del Toro seems to be going through a phase right now of retelling classic stories but with his own unique spin on it, keeping the core ideas while adding elements that make it his own. After his stunning version of Pinocchio, he now has his own take on Frankenstein, and while I do have some issues with it here and there, it still found its way into becoming one of my favorite movies of this year, which is funny because I said a similar thing in my last review. So let's get right into why you should watch Frankenstein. I think the biggest achievement of this film is managing to make a 2.5 hour long movie not feel like 2.5 hours. This movie is wonderfully paced, and its pacing is no doubt helped by the structure of the film being split into 3 parts. The parts being a prologue, Victor's story, and the monster story. And let me just say that while Victor's story is still really good, it's the monster story that actually pushed this movie into being a you should watch. And I think that transitions nicely into the one part of this film that's iffy for me. Victor, played by Oscar Isaac. Now, Oscar Isaac actually does a really good job at selling the whole mad scientist angle of Victor's character. Sometimes too well. What I mean by that is that there are moments where he seems to be overacting just a little. This wouldn't be worth bringing up unless everybody else played their parts perfectly. But everyone did. All of the other performances here are giving it 100%, so when Oscar Isaac gives 98%, in any other movie that wouldn't be noticeable, but here it is. Still, he does a great job, and it obviously doesn't bring the film down at all, I just wanted to bring it up. But speaking of this movie's phenomenal acting, I want to talk about easily the best performance in the whole film, Jacob Elordi as Frankenstein's monster. Not only is the makeup for the creature expertly done, but Jacob Elordi's performance shines through all the makeup to provide an emotional and memorable take on the character. The sets and costume design are also great, with so much detail being put into them, bringing the world of the 19th century to life. In summary, Frankenstein is another great adaptation from Guillermo del Toro, which reimagines the original story into something new while also keeping the charm and character of the original story intact. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should watch Frankenstein.
Hey! Why are you running? Why are you running?
I like the original Running Man. Yeah, it's a stupid movie, but luckily it's a fun type of stupid, not a boring type of stupid. It's just so over the top and ridiculous that it wraps back around into being hilarious. But if you know anything about the original story, then you know the 1987 film is basically a different story entirely from the source material. And so I was really interested when I heard they were taking another shot at the Running Man, this time being directed by Edgar Wright, and being closer to the book. For the most part, I liked this movie, with fun performances, action, and editing. but it fumbles a little near the finish line with an ending that feels a bit rushed. So let's get into, oddly enough, the second Bachman adaptation of this year, The Running Man. I think it's good to lay out what people were expecting with this movie. This is an Edgar Wright film. You know, Baby Driver, Scott Pilgrim, Shaun of the Dead. And out of all of his films, this is definitely the safest, and not nearly as out there as his other works. Now, this isn't a bad thing, but it can have an effect on how some may see the movie. I personally liked it and didn't mind it being a little more by the numbers, but I could see where some could have an issue with that, given the director's track record. That being said, it was a little disappointing to see a director like Edgar Wright being so toned down here, but it's not a big deal for me, and the film does manage to be charming in other ways. For the most part, the characters and their performances are really spot on, especially Glenn Powell as Ben Richards, who provides a wonderful array of crazy reactions and faces. The action is also fun, with a great amount of variety when it comes to the camera angles and different ways the hunters track down Ben. But I think the biggest issue I have with the movie is the ending. Don't get me wrong, I don't think the ending is bad, and I don't dislike it because it differs from the book. Actually, that's the good part about it, because as we all know, Stephen King rarely ends his stories well. However, the ending feels super rushed, with a character literally editing himself into the ending to wrap everything up. I said before that I actually like a lot of the editing in this, but here is where I feel it's a bit out of place. It really is a shame because the ending of a film is what you walk away with, and so if it doesn't quite stick the landing, it can lead to a messier experience overall. But looking at the movie as a whole, I'd say that for all its faults, there is something oddly charming about it. In summary, The Running Man is a fine, fun action movie with some nice editing and cinematography that suffers trying to tie everything together at the end. I don't agree with the amount of backlash this film has gotten, but I would be lying if I said I couldn't see why someone would find this movie unfavorable. Okay, if I was late for Frankenstein, then I'm really late for this. I have a few reasons as to why I didn't take a look at this game when it came out in September. One, there was a lot that released in September, like Chronos The New Dawn, The Long Walk, Silent Hill F, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, and of course, Hollow Knight Silksong. Two, I hadn't played the first Hades. I only recently took it out of my backlog after doing research for another video that you'll see later, but shh, don't tell. But after playing the first Hades, I realized I could now check out the sequel, which has been touted as one of the best games of this year, and after playing it, yeah, I see where people are coming from. Hades 2 is the kind of sequel that takes the core of its predecessor and builds upon it in all new ways to elevate the experience to be even better than what came before. So, let's get into why you should play Hades 2. I just want to start this review off by saying, man, the voice acting in this game is impressive. Not just in terms of quality, though all the actors do a phenomenal job, but also in terms of just how much voice acting there is. The same can be said for the first game, but in all my time playing Hades 2, I listened to possibly hundreds of lines of dialogue and never heard a repeating one. Every character you can speak to has unique dialogue depending on what you did in a run, what you've recently done story-wise, side quests, bosses, regular NPCs, all must have hundreds, if not thousands, of recorded dialogue, which is super commendable. The gameplay takes the hack and slash combat of the first game and adds upon it with the addition of new upgrades, spells, familiars, tools, and all sorts of other additions. And then there's the boss fights. Oh my god. I'm not even going to give anything away for you to experience for yourself, but all I'll say is, Scylla is one of the best boss fights I think I've experienced in a video game. It's so simple, yet so perfect in its execution. I think another thing that's cool about Hades 2 is that while I do like it more than the first game, I don't think it fully replaces it. How I would describe it is that Hades 1 is simpler and more difficult, whereas Hades 2 is more complex and easier due to all the tools at your disposal. I actually like these differences, as it gives me a reason to play both games rather than Hades 2 just fully replacing the first game. Both games have their merits, and it's really hard to pull that off with a sequel like this.
All of the characters are wonderfully written and voice acted, and I found the story to be engaging as well, with the way your relationship with some characters shift over the course of the game, for better or for worse. Every time I felt like I had seen everything this game had to offer, it took me aside, kneed me in the gut, and then told me I haven't even seen a quarter of it. In my opinion, AAA gaming this year can be summed up in one word: okay. Yes, there have been some real stinkers released this year from big studios, but for the most part, everything was just okay. Not terrible, but not great either. Meanwhile, indie and AA games have really just been running circles around AAA studios this year, and as someone who just recently discovered this game, Hades 2 is the victory lap. In summary, I really love this game. I didn't list any issues this game has, and that's because while there no doubt are some, there were no issues that would really dampen my experience. I could have talked about the underwhelming ending if I was playing the old version of the game. Yeah, apparently this game had kind of a disappointing ending, but in a patch later on, Supergiant Games actually changed it to be better, adding a whole bunch of new art and voice lines, so I never experienced the original ending. I'm glad I finally gave this series a shot, and I can't wait to see what Supergiant makes next. They're definitely on my radar now. But as for why I played these games, well, you'll have to wait just a little longer for that. Basically, what I'm saying is, you should play Hades 2.
How? How? How?
I don't know!
This video was originally supposed to be for Kirby Air Riders, but I recently went to go see the FNAF 2 movie and found I had way more to say about it. Kirby Air Riders is great, by the way. This movie has a lot of discussion around it with the insanely low Rotten Tomatoes score. My opinion of the first FNAF film is that it's eh. If I had this channel back when it came out, it would have been a yellow background for the thumbnail. The first movie had a lot of interesting ideas and amazing production design, but suffered from a disjointed core that felt like it didn't know what kind of movie it wanted to be. So now we have the follow-up, which I can safely say I liked this more than the first film. A lot of the issues I had with the FNAF movie have been fixed in the sequel, and for the most part, I'd say I had a good time with it. That being said, it does have a few glaring issues that can't be ignored. So let's get into a movie that apparently has the same rating as Morbius, Five Nights at Freddy's 2. Starting with what I liked about the movie, the characters are handled much better. The leads, Mike and Vanessa, played by Josh Hutcherson and Elizabeth Lail, felt less like real people in the first film and more like exposition dumps with faces. Here, both characters are much better handled and overall more interesting, with some of Vanessa's sections being especially interesting and actually got me a little invested in her character, which is something I wanted the games to do. There's my pot shot at Security Breach for the video. It's also interesting seeing her and Mike's dynamic in the movie, being two people who experienced trauma from the same man but in different ways and trying to overcome it together. Oh yeah, and then there's Abby. I didn't really care much for her character in the first movie, and unlike Mike and Vanessa, I still don't care for her much here. She's not a bad character, but I just didn't find her as interesting as the other characters. Another thing new to this sequel is the adaptation of some gameplay elements onto the big screen, which is sometimes handled well and other times not. This is your point of no return for spoilers. I was actually super impressed by how the music box was handled, where instead of it being a resource to manage, it instead works as a kind of crucifix for the puppet, because it reminds her of when she was alive and calms her down, eventually putting her to sleep. I think that's a really creative way to adapt what was just another thing to manage in the game into a part of the story. But then there's the mask. The mask didn't really even make that much sense in the game, but here it makes even less sense. In the game, they explain that the animatronics are built with facial scanners that can determine what's a guest, what's an animatronic, and what's a criminal. The movie doesn't give that explanation, so when the mask is used here, it just comes off as the animatronics being stupid. Speaking of which, let's talk about the robots. It's obvious to me that while this movie is trying to be a straight horror movie, it's more self-aware than what came before. And I think that's most evident with how the animatronics are handled, with goofy voices and stilted deliveries. That's not to say that this movie has no horror elements at all, because there were a few moments that were genuinely creepy and some jump scares that actually got me, mainly the ones involving the marionette. But above all else, the production design is still top-notch. The costumes, the sets, the animatronics all feel like they were ripped right out of the game, which was true for the first movie, but it's even more true here. And then there's the ending. I've gone on and on before about the difference between fun stupid and boring stupid, and for most of this movie, it fluctuates between actually scary and fun stupid. The ending is the only part that's boring stupid. I'm not gonna give the ending away here, but not only is it stupid, but it feels super rushed, and the last shot of the film really doesn't feel like the final shot. Actually, just like Sinners, I can't believe I'm comparing this movie to Sinners. I actually think that the post-credit scene would have worked better as the final shot rather than being hidden behind credits. In summary, Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was a fun time, and overall an improvement over the first FNAF movie, but it has a few things that still hold it back. I definitely think that critics are being too harsh on this film. Like, this film has issues, but the same score as the Electric State? Are we being real here? I am glad to see that feedback was taken into account to make this sequel better than the first. And who knows, maybe at this rate, the sixth FNAF movie will be a flawless masterpiece if they make it that far.
Would you like a coffee?
Where's the dog?
Dog.
The dog! You took the dog!
That's right, you get all of this.
Where's the dog?
Ah, Christmas. Where to begin? There's a lot I could do for a holiday special. So many different pieces of media I could talk about, like that fantastic Community episode or my personal favorite Christmas movie, It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, there are so many things in media that revolve around Christmas that I don't know what to do a video on this year. Screw it, I'm talking about Epic. In preparation for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, I decided to dive headfirst into Greek mythology-based media. This is why I ended up playing the Hades games, but I also ended up watching a bunch of movies and liked a good chunk of them. These two are especially underrated. But while I could easily do a video on any of those films, there was one project that I came across that really caught my eye. I had constantly seen people all throughout this year talking about something called Epic the Musical. Now, I'm not a big fan of musicals. It's not that I hate them, in fact there are some I really enjoy, but whether they be movies or stage plays, I'm just not chomping at the bit to see them. So what a coincidence that Epic is neither of those things and is instead a concept album that, to my surprise, was based on the Odyssey. Yeah, for the longest time, I just assumed that this was an original story. But I mean, can you blame me? The name is so generic and doesn't really give any indication that it's based on anything. Before this, the only thing that came to mind with the title Epic was that one Blue Sky movie with the slugs I remember seeing when I was like 6. Once I figured out it was about the Odyssey, I started digging into just what this thing even was, and saw a good amount of comparisons to Hamilton. Now I know this doesn't mean much coming from someone who just said they don't like musicals, but out of all the musicals I do like, Hamilton isn't one of them. So, this is a musical that seems to be greatly inspired by Hamilton. In other words, this isn't just something I could live without, this is something I would actively avoid. But, going against my gut, I decided to check it out, and absolutely loved it. So, let's get into why you should listen to, I guess, Epic the Musical. Spoilers for the whole thing, by the way, but then again, this story is like over 2,000 years old, so I can't believe I'm about to summarize the Odyssey, but for those who don't know, the story follows Odysseus returning to his home of Ithaca after winning the Trojan War. He's the guy that came up with the whole wooden horse idea. However, his journey home goes sour as Odysseus is confronted with all sorts of obstacles, such as gods, monsters, and a few really horny women. While all of this is happening, Odysseus' wife and child, Penelope and Telemachus, are trying their best to hold out hope for his return as 108 suitors fight over Penelope's hand in marriage. I don't really know how to review something like Epic. I've never done an album review before. But Epic isn't an album. It's 9. Yeah, this thing is split up into 9 sagas, being Troy, Cyclops, Ocean, Circe,
Underworld, Thunder, Wisdom, Vengeance, and Ithaca. The story actually starts with the Trojan horse, which it seems like Nolan's adaptation will also do. I initially thought it was weird to start here because the Siege of Troy isn't a part of the Odyssey. It's not even part of the Iliad, which is the preceding story. But the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. Starting the story with the horse, 1, gives us an immediate connection with Odysseus by tying him to a famous symbol, and 2, starts the story with a big action scene before calming everything down. And Epic does both of those things extremely well, with the second song, Just a Man, being one of the best songs in the whole project. But I do think that segues pretty well into the first issue I have with Epic, and I'm saying issue in quotations here because it's not something major, but it's still noticeable. Epic was made by Jorge Rivera Herranz, I think I said that right, and Jorge also plays Odysseus himself. This is very similar to Hamilton being created by and starring Lin-Manuel Miranda, and just like Hamilton, I think Jorge might be my least favorite actor in the whole thing. He's not a bad singer, in fact I'd happily listen to him over Lin-Manuel any day of the week, but there are certain parts where he feels a little weak. He can nail the emotional moments, but when he has to get angry, sometimes he can perfect that rage and give a jaw-dropping performance, but most of the time, not so much. It's even stranger when you consider someone like Aaron Alexander, who plays Antinous, is really giving his all here and probably has my favorite singing voice. He gets like 1 2/3 of a song. He's at the end of Legendary, he sings half of Little Wolf, and then he's the main singer for Hold Them Down. But enough about the boring old people. What about the gods? I love how Jorge handled the gods in this. He basically treats them all like WWE wrestlers, giving them all their own intros and themes. They're all wonderfully characterized and give some of the best songs like Ruthlessness, Thunderbringer, and God Games. I thought I'd also share my favorite and least favorite saga. My favorite would have to be Underworld. It's the shortest with only 3 songs, but Jorge puts so much emotion into each one. I've never cried when experiencing a piece of media. I've gotten real close a couple of times, but I've never cried. This saga was one that got pretty close. Specifically that one part of the song, The Underworld. Not Polites, the mom. That almost got me. As for my least favorite saga, it's Circe. Usually when I re-listen to Epic, this is the saga I skip the most. The saga starts with Puppeteer, which is my least favorite song in Epic, which is weird because both the Duke and my dad listened to Epic and like Puppeteer. I think my main problem is with the chorus. No, I'm not a player, I'm a puppeteer. No, I don't play, I puppeteer, yeah. Something about that rubs me the wrong way. Wouldn't You Like is next, which is good. I like it, but in my opinion, Dangerous is just this song, but better. Done For is pretty forgettable and is my least favorite fight song. But then There Are Other Ways. Yeah, I usually just skip to this song on replay. It's really good. No notes. If it sounds like a lot of my criticisms are nitpicks, it's because they are. All art has subjective qualities, but music is one of the most subjective. That, and I don't really have a lot of negative points to give for Epic. It's just really well made, especially considering it's from such a small team. I can't wait to see what he does next with Ilium. In summary, Merry Christmas, everyone. This year was pretty rough for me, and probably for a lot of you too, so I think I'm ready to leave 2025 behind. But before I can do that, I have some business to take care of.